Today we're going to be working on the Sienna trousers. So this is my new pattern that by the time you're watching this I will have just released. I've set this to go live at the same time as the pattern, and this is the sew along tutorial for that pattern. So if you want to sew these trousers, I've linked the pattern in the description box down below, and if you already have the pattern we'll get sewing these in just a second. So here are the Sienna trousers, and they are a high-waisted elasticated waist trouser, and as you can see here, this is the waist. We've got a drawstring in the waist. There's some lovely pockets. Now these are side seam pockets, but they're not your standard side seam pockets. So as you can see here, they sit nice and flat. We've got some top stitching around the edge, and then inside the pocket is actually split into two pieces. So you can have a lining piece instead if you prefer, which means the trousers can stay quite lightweight. Now, the intention for these trousers was to be a kind of summer trouser, something a bit casual, something easy to wear, to chuck on, and that is exactly what they are. I am so happy with how these turned out. Now, this pair I made for myself, and there's been a bit of a rush getting this pattern out, to be honest, because tomorrow I am flying to Paris for a week and I wanted to get these filmed, get the pattern up before I leave, and I want to wear these on the plane. So I'm going to be wearing these trousers with a white t-shirt tucked in, which I'm really excited for because they are super comfy. Now these ones specifically I made out of an IKEA bedsheet, and I will also link the bedsheet in the description box should you be interested in that. It's 100% cotton and it works perfectly. It's kind of giving that pajama vibe, but that pajama vibe is kind of really on trend at the minute, so I've got no problem wearing these outdoors. I will absolutely wear them, but they'd also be great for lounge trousers too. So that's that. They come in sizes UK 4 to 32, and the finished garment measurements and body measurements will all be on the website if you want to go and check and just make sure that you fit into one of those sizes. Fabric wise, I'd recommend something like a 100% cotton or a linen or something like that to be kind of breezy and nice for the summer, or you could get away with a viscose. That would be really nice and drapey. It would give a more like drapey, lightweight look. You could also use something like a silk if you wanted a really premium upmarket silky pair. You could use a silk. That would look so nice in these. In fact, I'm definitely considering whether I want to make a silk pair for myself. Watch this space, I may well do that. I think that's everything for now, and I don't think I've got anything else to talk to you about before we sew them, so let's just get straight into it. If you are using the US letter or A4 file, you will first need to assemble your pattern. I am using A0, which I had printed at a print shop, so I can go straight into cutting my size. You should have a front and back leg, pocket piece A, pocket piece B, and a waistband piece. For this pattern, you will need your main fabric, a small piece of lightweight lining fabric, some 38mm or 1.5 inch elastic, and a small piece of lightweight fusible interfacing. We will also need to create buttonholes for the drawstring, so you should check that your machine is able to create buttonholes and that you have a buttonhole foot. It should look a little something like this. Next up, we need to prep our fabric. I've already pre-washed my fabric, which I would recommend if you haven't done so already, as this will help to pre-shrink the fabric. Once it's dry, we need to iron our fabric to remove as many creases as possible and to help us cut accurately. For my fabric, I am using a 100% cotton IKEA bedsheet, so I'm going to lay out my pattern pieces a little differently to yours. But if you want to, you can check out the cutting plans in the instructions booklet for suggestions on how to place and cut your fabric. Make sure your grain line on your pattern runs parallel to your selvage, and then pin your pieces to the fabric and cut around them. For this pattern, you will need to cut a pair of fronts, a pair of backs, 2 pairs of each of your pocket pieces, so 4 total of each, and a pair of your drawstring pieces. Make sure to snip into your notches and also mark your buttonhole placement. I have marked my buttonhole with a heat erasable pen for now, but we will be sewing some other parts first, so I'll remark with pins later, as I'll need to press this seam and my markings will disappear when I do that. We'll now get on to sewing, and we're going to start by sewing our crotch seam of our front and back trouser legs. If at any point you're confused which is the front and which is the back, just remember that the back piece has a longer crotch curve than the front. Make sure your back pieces are right sides together, then sew the crotch seam using a 1 cm seam allowance. Repeat for the front crotch and then overlock or zigzag stitch both of these seams to neaten. If you've used a heat erasable pen like me, remark your buttonholes with metal pins or a tailor's tack, then press your front and back crotch seams to one side. We're now going to start constructing the pockets. With right sides together, match up the single notches of pocket A to pocket B and pin in place. Pay close attention to which way up pocket piece A is. They should be placed as shown here. Once you've pinned them in place, sew pocket A to pocket B with 1 cm seam allowance and then overlock or zigzag stitch to neaten. Press your seam towards pocket piece A and then stitch your seam allowance down onto pocket piece A, as close as possible to the seam line. Take your front trousers and overlock or zigzag both side edges to neaten. While you are there, also overlock or zigzag all the straight edges of your pocket piece. The overlocking will cover your notches on both your front trousers and the pockets, so you'll need to snip into these again. With right sides facing, place your pockets onto your trousers, matching up the notches. Your pockets should be pointing down as shown here. Once pinned, sew your pockets to your trousers, but only sew in between the notches. Try to be as accurate as possible with this step. Snip into your notches through both the side of the pocket and leg up to the new stitching line, being careful not to cut through your stitching. We can now treat the unstitched part of the pocket separately to the stitched part. Push your pocket away from the trouser leg and fold your pocket back to the wrong side of the leg. Press in place and match up the unstitched edges of the pocket with the side edges of your leg. You'll notice it now looks like you have a cutout on the side of each leg. Pin in place, then top stitch around these cutouts to secure using a 1 cm seam allowance. Take your other pocket pieces and place them directly on top of the already attached pockets with right sides facing. Pin the pockets together all the way around the edge, being careful not to pin through the rest of your trousers. Your pockets should be treated separately to the trousers in this step. Sew your pocket bags together, making sure that you are only sewing through the pocket bags and not the rest of the trousers. Overlock these seams to neaten. Your pocket is now done and it will be treated as part of your front leg. I like to now sew a line of stitching at the top and bottom of the pocket opening to secure the pocket to the trouser legs at the side. This will then also secure the overlocking where we snipped into it. Next, take your back trousers and overlock the side seams to neaten. Lay out your front trousers with the right side facing you. Then place the back trousers on top with right sides of the front and back together. Match up your side seams and pin in place. Sew together at the side seams using your normal 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, being careful not to sew your pocket opening closed. I like to start sewing my seam as normal, then when I get close to my pocket opening, I like to use some small scissors, a seam ripper or a pin to mark the corner of my pocket opening. I do this so that I can get really close to the corner without sewing over it. Once I've gone past the corner, I push the pocket opening further into the trousers so I don't catch it while sewing. Then I mark my next corner and also sew alongside this. Once I'm past the pocket, I continue sewing as normal for the rest of the side seam. Here is how it should look from the right side once sewn. With right sides together, match up your front and back crotch points and then pin together. Then, starting from one hem and finishing at the other, pin your inside leg seam together. Sew your inside leg seam using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock your inside leg seam and then press this seam and your side seams towards the back, making sure that your pockets are still facing towards the front. We're now going to work on the waistband and get it prepped for buttonholes, so make sure your buttonholes are marked with either metal pins or tailor's tacks. Then, from the wrong side, place a small square of fusible interfacing over the top of each buttonhole area. The side with the glue dot should be placed onto the fabric. Press in place with your iron until the interfacing sticks nicely to this area. Once you've done this, remark your buttonholes with a heat erasable pen or chalk. We're going to sew our buttonholes and you don't want thread from your tailor's tack or pins getting in the way here. I haven't shown how to set up your machine for buttonholes here, but if you'd like a video on that, please let me know and I'll see what I can do. Sew a few buttonhole tests on some scrap fabric until you get the size required. Then when you're happy, turn to the right side of your trousers and using the buttonhole mark as your guide, create a buttonhole either side of the front seam. Then seam rip or cut through the centre of your buttonhole to open it up, being careful not to cut through the stitching. Head back to the ironing board and fold the top of your trousers to the wrong side of the fabric by 1 cm and press into place. Then fold again by 4.5 cm and press this into place. Starting just before the centre back, sew in place as close to the edge as possible, leaving a gap of approximately 5 cm or 2 inches at the end to insert your elastic. Cut your elastic to size using the size chart in the instructions booklet, or measure your waist and cut your elastic 4 cm or 1.5 inches shorter than this measurement. Attach a safety pin or bodkin to one end and then use the bodkin or safety pin to feed the elastic through the hole you left in the waistband. Make sure to leave some of the elastic poking out of the hole and don't pull the whole thing through. Continue to feed the elastic through the waistband until you get to the other end, being careful to keep your elastic flat and not twisted as you go. When you get to the other end, remove your bodkin or safety pin and lay one piece of elastic over the other, crossing them over by about 2.5 cm or 1 inch. Sew in place using a zigzag stitch and sew over a few times to secure. You can also use a straight stitch on a wider elastic like this if you prefer. If you want to use a straight stitch, sew a box with a cross inside to secure, as this is a really strong stitch. Continuing on from your previous waistband stitching, sew the hole closed in the waistband. Then stretch out your waistband and elastic a few times to distribute the fabric evenly around the elastic. Pin around the waistband to hold the elastic in place once it's all been distributed evenly. We're now going to run some rows of stitching through your waistband to secure the elastic and stop it moving around. First, change your stitch length to a longer stitch. Stretch your elastic in sections between the pins until the fabric lies flat along the elastic. Top stitch around the waistband through the elastic, sewing 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch away from the top of the waistband. Repin your waistband and then do exactly the same at the bottom of the waistband, sewing 1 cm away from the bottom waistband stitching. You won't be able to see the distance markers on your machine for this, so you may wish to mark your seam allowance with heat erasable pens or chalk. However, most domestic machine feet are about 1 cm wide anyway, so you could just use the edge of your foot as a guide. That's your waistband ready for the drawstring, so we'll get that made up next. To make your drawstring, first start by sewing your drawstring pieces together with right sides facing, along one of the short edges. Press this seam open. Once you've got a long piece of fabric, fold both short ends to the wrong side of the fabric and press. Then fold the entire piece with wrong sides together, matching up the long edges of the strip. Unfold the strip, then using the crease you made with your iron as the centre line, fold both long edges in to meet at the centre and press. Lastly, fold the entire strip one more time so that the raw edges of the drawstring are enclosed. Sew the entire drawstring together along the open edge to secure. You may find it's a little bit bulky to sew, so I'd recommend starting your stitching on a separate piece of fabric and then continuing onto your drawstring from here. You can then gently pull on this other piece of fabric to help guide the start of your drawstring through the machine. Attach a safety pin or bodkin to one end of your drawstring and then feed through one buttonhole. Continue to feed through and then pull out of the other buttonhole. Next up, we'll hem the trousers, but before doing so, I'd recommend trying them on and working out the length that you need. We'll be using a 3.5 cm hem allowance, so take this into consideration when you determine your length. Once you've determined your length, turn up the hem by 1 cm and press. Then turn up by 2.5 cm or 1 inch and press. Sew your hem in place as close to the edge as possible, and then that's it, you're done.